The year was 1932, and Australia was suffering through one of the worst economic slumps in its history. Part of this was due to the worldwide Great Depression that had begun 4 years earlier, causing widespread unemployment, poverty, and despair. But at the same time, farmers in the southwest region of Western Australia were enduring something else as well. An invasion of their fields by large, aggressive birds, which ate their crops and trampled their land. And as the human population starved, so did the emus. Their numbers swelled to unprecedented levels, and they grew bolder and more destructive every day. So when the emus ate enough crops to push people over the edge, the Australian government sent in the army to teach these feathered fiends a lesson they would never forget. But what the government did not expect was for the lesson to be a two-way street. For soon after the troops arrived on the scene, it became clear that whoever was going to win the ensuing war, it would not be the army. Hi, everyone. This is the host. And today, we are going to talk about a conflict so weird that if someone wrote it into a movie script, he would get laughed out of Hollywood. I am, of course, talking about the Emu War, also known as the Emu Debacle or the Great Emu Strike of 1932. Now, let me catch him up to speed. In the early 1930s, the Australian state of Western Australia experienced something called the Great Depression. This was a terrible time for the country because farming was hard to do during the dust bowl era, and many farmers were losing their crops and their farms to the unforgiving environment. But on top of this misfortune, something new appeared in the area, a mass migration of emus, which were eating their way through the wheat fields and destroying everything in sight. The emu is a large flightless bird that lives in Australia and is related to the ostrich. It can stand up to 6 feet tall and weigh over 100 pounds. And although they cannot fly, they are surprisingly agile creatures, capable of running for long distances at top speeds of 30 miles per hour. With a strong kick from their powerful legs and sharp beak, emus can easily kill a human if provoked. So when the emus invaded the farmland in droves, the farmers had good reason to be worried. The government in Canberra quickly got involved, dispatching troops to help deal with the situation. But despite having modern weapons, the soldiers were completely unprepared for what happened next. In late November 1932, the first battle between the emus and the military took place near the town of Campen. Soldiers set up machine guns and opened fire on the oncoming emu threat. They must have been confident going into the fight because they expected to wipe out the entire emu population in a single day. However, as the smoke cleared, it became obvious that they had only managed to kill a few birds. It turned out the emus were much smarter than the army anticipated, and were able to scatter and outrun the bullets meant to stop them. Major GPW Meredith, who led the soldiers into battle, later recounted the shocking ferocity of the emus, writing, "If we had a machine gun with 5 of the quickest and coolest men on it, they would probably dispose of 500 birds, but not 500 consecutive shots." In other words, the moment that bird sees that he is being fired at, he makes tracks. The men think they are doing all the killing, but it is the bird that does most of the dying. To make matters worse, the emus seemed to anticipate where the soldiers would set up their guns based on their previous positions. And so once the shooting started, the birds scattered to safety before the guns could reload, meaning that each soldier could only shoot one bird before the rest of the flock disappeared into the bush. As days went by, the emu attacks on the farmlands continued unabated, and the military was forced to follow them deeper and deeper into the outback. This made the job of protecting the farmers extremely difficult, because now the soldiers had to carry all of their supplies and equipment with them wherever they went, meaning they couldn't stay put and wait for the emus to come to them. Instead, they had to chase the birds down in trucks. Sometimes they would ambush the emus in caves or try to corner them in small areas, but no matter what, the soldiers could never get close enough to do any real damage. The emus simply proved too nimble and too smart for the army's tactics. At one point, Major Meredith even tried hiding his truck behind a tree, while the engine was still running, and jump out and shoot the emus before they could fly away. But the clever birds saw him coming and ran away anyway. By December, the war had turned into a humiliating defeat for the army. The soldiers had done nothing to stop the emus, and their presence in the outback was becoming more of a burden than anything else. After all, the emus weren't attacking anyone. The humans were the ones who fired upon them. And so, after a month of fighting, the troops packed up and headed back to base, leaving the emus free to roam the outback as they pleased. According to official documents, the army killed around 10,000 emus during the war, but that represented only a tiny fraction of the actual population. How many emus there were exactly will never be known, but historians estimate that there were probably around 20 million of them in Australia at the time, meaning the military only eliminated about 5% of the total number of birds. This was obviously a disappointing outcome for the farmers, but there was little they could do about it. While the army's strategy had been to shoot the emus in open areas where they could be easily targeted, the birds preferred to forage in the tall grasses, which made them much harder to hit. If the soldiers tried to get closer, they ran the risk of being kicked or stabbed by an emu, both of which could be fatal. And if they used aircraft to spot the emus from above, then they risked being dive-bombed by eagles, of which there were plenty in the outback. With no easy solution to the problem, the farmers eventually turned to bounty hunting, paying people to kill emus for money. Eventually, things returned to normal, and the emus moved on to less populated areas. But the war had become a national embarrassment, and people still talked about it for decades to come. At the end of the day, the Emu War was a battle between two very different kinds of opponents. The humans had guns and military training, but they lacked the mobility and cunning of their enemy. Meanwhile, the emus had neither, but thanks to their size, strength, and agility, they were able to hold off the attack. Some say the emus won because they were simply more natural than the humans. After all, they had evolved in Australia for hundreds of thousands of years and knew the land like the back of their feet. Others say it was because the military was inexperienced and poorly led. But whatever the case may be, one thing is for sure. The emus were the true victors of the war and should be celebrated as such. So let this be a lesson to us all. No matter how advanced our technology may be, we should never underestimate the power of nature or the determination of those who fight for it. And with that ends this edition of our channel. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Also comment what topic would you like to hear next about. And until next time, stay safe out there.